A woman on her knees in a wagon bed west of Fort Laramie. The oxen still pulling, dust through the canvas. No doctor, no laudanum, and no one stopping. Between 1843 and 1869, thousands of women gave birth on the Oregon Trail. Everything you think you know about it comes from a world that decided the story was not worth telling. We are not going to the movies for this. We are going to the diaries they kept in pencil on damp paper. What was the one truth about frontier birth that Hollywood could never show? Number 25. Trail families named their newborns for the ground where they arrived. There are settlement records in Oregon showing children christened Platte, Laramie, and Independence. A boy born near Chimney Rock carried that name into old age. It seems charming until you sit with what it means. Birth on the trail was so routine it became geography, not a crisis, not even a surprise. A woman went into labor and a baby came. The child wore the name of a river or a fort because that was all its mother could see through the canvas. Long halts were rarely granted, and the journey continued as planned. Families marked the birth the same way they marked a river crossing. Hollywood always presented frontier birth as a single, terrifying scene, one frantic moment in an otherwise quiet journey. The sweating woman, the boiling water, the husband pacing outside. It was not like that. It was an ordinary Tuesday on the Platte. It happened so often that the companies barely noted it in their records. A child was born, a name was chosen from the nearest landmark, and the wagons kept rolling before the sun went down. Number 24. The wagon bed, 4 feet wide, 10 feet long. That was the delivery room. Inside it sat 1,600 to 2,000 pounds of supplies: flour, salt pork, tools, a plow, a rifle, a butter churn, and whatever children were too small to walk. The canvas cover leaked in rain and held heat in summer until the air inside could pass 100 degrees by midday. The bed was bare wooden boards with no springs of any kind. Every stone, every rut, every dried creek bed came straight through the frame and into the body of whoever lay there. A woman in labor could not stretch flat. She could not stand. She lay wedged among sacks and crates in a space smaller than a modern bathroom, with the whole wagon pitching under her. Today, the average delivery room in an American hospital measures 200 square feet, with adjustable lighting and a call button for a nurse. A prairie schooner offered 40. You shared every inch with everything your family owned on Earth, and the wagon did not stop moving while you were in it. Number 23. The vote. Most wagon companies operated under written constitutions drafted before departure. Officers were elected. Rules were binding. And when a woman went into labor, the company voted on whether to halt. Her body was subject to majority rule. If the train was behind schedule, if water ahead was uncertain, if the captain judged the delay too dangerous, the vote went against stopping. The woman labored in a rolling wagon or was left behind with 1 or 2 neighbor women while the rest of the train pressed forward. A small camp of women and children alone on the open prairie, unprotected, waiting for a birth to finish so they could walk fast enough to catch up before dark. This was not cruelty. It was arithmetic. The calendar said you had to clear the Blue Mountains and reach the Columbia before the first November snow, or the entire company risked starvation and death. One woman's labor was measured against the survival of 60 people. The 60 usually won the vote. Number 22. No doctor within 500 miles. The nearest physician was occasionally an Army surgeon at Fort Laramie, or a trader with basic medical skills at Fort Hall. A military man with limited medicines who treated soldiers and trappers and had no obstetric training. Most wagon trains of 40 to 100 souls carried no medical professional of any kind. Not a doctor, not a trained midwife, not even a pharmacist. A woman in obstructed labor on the open prairie in 1850 faced the same odds she would have faced in 1750. A full century of medical progress counted for nothing out beyond the Missouri. There was no surgery available, no forceps unless someone had packed a pair from their parlor back east, no understanding of why a baby would not come or what to do when it would not. Only the waiting, the prayers, and the hands of whatever neighbor woman was brave enough to climb into that wagon and try. Today, the average American woman gives birth in a hospital with a team of specialists and a pharmacy down the hall. On the trail, she had a stranger from Missouri and a prayer. Number 21. The corset. Social convention followed women 2,000 miles into the wilderness and would not let go. Daguerreotypes of emigrant women and surviving trail garments in museum collections confirm that many women wore bone stays and laced corsets deep into pregnancy on the march. Restrictive garments pressing against the abdomen and ribs during months of hard walking over ground that had never seen a wheel. This was not vanity. A woman who abandoned her corset on the trail was announcing her condition to every person in the company, and 1850 propriety did not permit that announcement. So she laced it looser month by month and adjusted it above the belly as best she could. And she walked 15 miles a day with whalebone pressing against a body already doing the hardest work it would ever do. Nobody in any Western you have ever watched wore one. Nobody in Hollywood thought to ask what a pregnant woman on the frontier actually wore under her dress. Number 20. The diet. Salt pork, flour, dried beans, coffee if you were lucky. For 5 to 6 months, that was everything a pregnant woman had. No fresh fruit after the first week out. No vegetables after the greens ran out somewhere east of the Platte. Women developed scurvy, loose teeth, bleeding gums, a fatigue that settled into the bones and refused to leave. The baby took whatever nutrition it could from a body running on almost nothing, and the mother's body gave it because the body does not negotiate. It gives until it cannot. By the time the wagons reached the Blue Mountains, the flour was full of weevils. The bacon had gone so rancid the dogs would not touch it. Today, a prenatal nutrition plan lists folic acid, iron, calcium, and a dozen supplements. On the trail in 1850, a pregnant woman ate what was left. What was left was slowly starving her and the child she carried from the inside out. Number 19. Alkali water. West of Fort Laramie, the water itself became an enemy. Alkali springs along the Platte, and the sweet water poisoned cattle and people without distinction. The oxen drank and dropped dead within hours. Lodisa Frizzell described it in her diary of 1852. Amelia Stewart Knight warned her family away from certain springs in 1853. A pregnant woman who drank alkali water suffered violent cramping, diarrhea lasting for days, and dehydration in country where the next clean water might be 30 miles ahead. A body already weakened by months of walking and a diet of salt and flour had no reserve left when the water turned against it. The trail gave you two choices. Drink what was in front of you or walk thirsty until the next clean stream. Neither choice was safe. Both could kill, and a pregnant woman standing over a pool of water she did not trust had nobody to tell her which risk was worse. Number 18. The jolting. The wagons had no springs. The ground had no road. The vibration was constant, and it was brutal, and there was no way to escape it for even an hour. Multiple emigrant journals reference women losing pregnancies to the shaking of the wagon. It did not stop for 12 to 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 5 straight months. Miscarriage on the trail was not rare. It was expected. A woman miscarried, bled, was tended by the neighbor women, cleaned herself as best she could, and walked the next morning. The wagon that was supposed to carry her family to a new life shook the child out of her body, and there was no medical response to offer her. No treatment, no rest, no acknowledgement beyond a few words in a diary if the woman kept one at all. The trail drew no line between a woman who had just lost a pregnancy and a woman who had not. Both walked the same miles. Both cooked the same supper over the same fire. Number 17. Neighbor women. There was no midwife on the Oregon Trail. There was whoever stepped forward when the screaming started. Sometimes that meant a woman from Indiana who had borne 6 children herself and helped deliver a few others back in the settlement. Sometimes it meant a girl of 16 who had watched once from the doorway and remembered enough to try. She carried no instruments. She owned no manual she trusted. She had her own 2 hands and whatever nerve remained after her own day of walking 20 miles through dust and heat. The lives she saved with nothing but experience and willingness. Most of their names are gone now. The diaries rarely recorded who helped at a birth, just that someone came, that the woman and child lived or did not. These unnamed neighbor women delivered more babies on the frontier than any physician in any eastern city. They asked for nothing in return. They did it because no one else would. And not one of them is remembered by name in any history book or any film. Remember the question I asked you at the start, the one truth Hollywood could never put on screen. We are not there yet, but we are close enough now to feel it coming. Number 16. Herbal remedies that could kill. Ergot of rye to speed contractions. Blue cohosh to bring on labor. Pennyroyal to force a stalled delivery forward. Tansy brewed into a tea strong enough to burn the throat on the way down. These were the only medicines available to a woman in labor on the trail, carried in cloth bags or traded at outposts along the road. Every one of them was dangerous. Ergot in the wrong dose caused violent convulsions and gangrene of the extremities. Pennyroyal in excess could stop a woman's heart cold. Dr. John Gunn's Domestic Medicine, one of the most popular health guides carried west, listed these remedies without dosages anyone could trust. The line between medicine and poison was a guess. A guess made by a frightened woman in a moving wagon, measuring with her fingers in poor light, praying that the amount in her palm was close enough to write, and knowing that if she guessed wrong, there was no second chance. Number 15. No privacy. Canvas walls that hid nothing from anyone. Other families camped 10 feet away. Cook fires close enough to hear a conversation at a whisper. Children sharing the wagon bed. Men standing just beyond the tailgate. Birth on the trail was a public event, whether the mother wanted it that way or not. Some diaries mention hanging extra blankets as a screen. Most do not mention any barrier at all. A woman's most vulnerable hour happened in a space where privacy was a physical impossibility. Surrounded by people she may have known for only a few weeks since leaving a staging town in Missouri. And the silence in the diaries about this is deafening. These women wrote freely about weather, rivers, the cost of flour at Fort Bridger, the condition of the grass. They did not write about what it felt like to have no wall between their body and the world at the moment that body opened. That silence tells you everything about what they endured and how little they believed anyone wanted to hear it. Number 14. The quickening. In the 1840s and 50s, a pregnancy could not be confirmed until the mother felt the baby move inside her. That usually came around 4 or 5 months in. A woman could leave Independence, Missouri, in early April without suspecting anything. She might not learn the truth about her own body until she was deep into present-day Nebraska with no possibility of turning back. 600 miles from home. The trail behind her already filled with wagons, the grass eaten down to dirt, and no eastbound company willing to take a pregnant woman aboard. Her body delivered the news at the worst possible time, in the middle of the hardest physical journey of her life. And she could do nothing with that knowledge except absorb it in silence. Tell the neighbor women when she was ready, and keep walking west into whatever was waiting. No doctor to consult, no way to measure how far along she was, no way to guess whether the child would come in the mountains, at a river crossing, or in the desert beyond the Snake. She walked into the unknown, carrying the unknown inside her. Number 13. Nursing on the march. A woman who had given birth the day before was expected to breastfeed while walking beside the wagon. No chair, no shade, no moment to sit and hold the baby still. Milk production requires calories and hydration. The trail provided almost none of either. Women nursed while dehydrated, malnourished, sunburned, and exhausted past anything they had ever known in their former lives. Their milk failed within days or weeks. When it failed, there was no formula, no substitute except raw cow's milk from the trail herd, if a cow had survived the alkali and the desert crossings. Many newborns had no milk source at all. A woman's body was being asked to do two impossible things at the same time. Walk 15 or 20 miles through dust and heat with cracked lips and an empty stomach, and somehow manufacture enough food inside her own starving body to keep a newborn alive until the next morning, and the next after that. Number 12. Premature labor. South Pass, the great crossing of the Continental Divide, sits at 7,500 feet above the sea. The trail climbed through mountain terrain, plunged into desert basins, and forded ice-cold rivers in rapid, punishing succession for weeks at a stretch. The physical toll of altitude, exhaustion, dehydration, thin air, and relentless fear triggered premature labor in women who still had weeks or months left to carry. A premature infant born on the trail in 1850 had no chance of surviving. There was no warming box, no incubator, no oxygen to give those tiny, unfinished lungs. There was only a canvas-covered wagon and a mother who could do nothing at all except hold the child against her bare chest. She wrapped it in every scrap of cloth she owned, and she walked, hoping that her heartbeat and her warmth and her prayers might somehow substitute for the weeks of growing the child still needed. In most cases, they could not. The child lived for hours, or a day, or two, and then it did not. We are past the halfway mark now. The answer to the question I asked you at the start is very close, and I will tell you plainly, it is not what you think it is. Number 11. Infant mortality. The best estimates put the number somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 3. Trail-born babies who did not survive the journey west to Oregon or California. Dysentery took them. Exposure took them. Contaminated water and starvation when the mother's milk ran dry. For every child named for a fort or a river crossing, another was buried beside the wagon ruts in an unmarked hole before its parents had chosen a name. Today, the infant mortality rate in the United States stands at roughly 5 deaths per 1,000 live births. On the Oregon Trail, that figure may have reached 200 per 1,000, or 300 or worse. Nobody was keeping records. There were no birth certificates filed along the Platte River, no death notices written in the Sweetwater Valley. There was only the ground, and the small graves scraped into it with a shovel or a bare hand. The wagons pulled away before the turned earth had time to settle. The ruts you can still walk today in parts of Wyoming and Oregon run past ground where babies were buried by mothers who never came back to visit. Number 10. Stillbirths and same-day burials. Born dead, wrapped in a piece of cloth torn from a spare shirt, placed in a shallow hole dug beside the wagon ruts by a father who had been walking since dawn. The grave sometimes driven over deliberately, so the packed earth would discourage wolves from digging it open in the night. And the mother, still bleeding, still shaking, climbed back into the wagon or walked beside it on legs that could barely carry her weight. Still in the first raw hours of a grief she had no time to feel. Because the train was already moving. The captain had given the order. There was water to reach before dark. Some diaries record the burial and the departure in the same entry, the same sentence. The distance between the moment of birth, the moment of burial, and the morning march could be measured in hours, not days. A woman buried her child beside the trail and walked over the grave with the rest of the company before the dirt had settled flat. Number 9. River crossings. The Platte, the Snake, the Columbia. Every major crossing was a drowning risk, and drowning was one of the leading causes of death on the entire trail. Now place a woman 8 months pregnant inside a wagon being floated across a swollen river on a raft of lashed logs. The current pulling hard, the raft tilting as the water surged underneath. Or see her wading chest deep through fast cold water with a toddler on her hip and mud sucking at her boots. The rivers did not pause for labor. They did not hold still for fear. The crossings came when the trail reached them. At Three Island Crossing on the Snake River, the bottom was uneven volcanic rock, slippery and invisible beneath dark water. A woman too heavy with child to move quickly through current moved slowly instead, fighting the river with a body already fighting something else entirely. Some of them made it to the far bank on their own feet. Some were pulled across by the hands of other women, and some of them went under the water and did not come back up. Number 8. Cholera. In the epidemic years of 1849 through 1852, cholera swept down the trail faster than the wagons could move. It killed a healthy man standing upright in the morning and put him in the ground before sunset. A pregnant woman, already dehydrated and nutritionally gutted by months of salt pork and bad water, was among the most vulnerable human beings on the continent. The disease caused violent purging that could trigger premature labor hours before the mother's own body gave out. Some women delivered while dying of cholera. Some delivered a living child and died within hours of the birth, never holding what they had carried 2,000 miles. Historian John Unruh, in his study of the Overland trails, estimated a grave every 80 yards along the worst stretches of the Platte River Road in those years. The cholera did not ask whether a woman was carrying a child. It moved through a wagon camp the way a fire moves through dry grass. Number 7. Children who watched. In the summer of 1844, the 7 Sager children walked beside their parents' wagon heading west. They watched their father Henry die of camp fever near the Green River in late August. Then they watched their mother Naomi weaken over the following days and weeks. Naomi had given birth to a daughter, Henrietta, on the trail shortly before Henry died. The birth left her depleted. The grief finished what the birth had started. Catherine Sager was 9 years old. She would write about it decades later in a memoir that still survives. She remembered the sound of her mother breathing inside the wagon while the oxen pulled forward. She remembered when the breathing stopped. Catherine carried that sound for 60 years. She put it down on paper with the careful stillness of a woman who learned at 9 that the world does not pause for grief. It keeps moving. The way the oxen kept moving, the way the trail kept moving, the way everything kept moving except the people it left behind. Number 6. The Diary. Silence. This is the one I need you to hold on to. Amelia Stewart Knight left one of the most detailed emigrant diaries in existence. From April to September of 1853, she recorded every creek crossing, every broken wheel, every child's fever, every thunderstorm, every mile of dust and mud and river water and heat. She wrote almost every day without fail. She was pregnant the entire 5 months of that journey. She knew it from the beginning. Her diary never once mentions the pregnancy, not one word in 5 months of daily entries. On September 17, 1853, somewhere near the end of the trail in Oregon Territory, she gave birth to her 8th child. The entry for that day is almost nothing, a few bare words after 5 months of faithful recording. The birth of a human being barely left a mark on the page. Hold that silence. Remember it. It is the answer to the question I asked you at the beginning. We are coming back to it now. Number 5. Childbed fever. Puerperal sepsis. The invisible killer that waited until after the birth was over and everything seemed safe. Germ theory did not exist on the frontier. Nobody understood what caused infection. Hands were not washed before delivery. The same hands that dug in trail mud, dressed raw and rancid meat, cleaned the infected hooves of lame oxen, reached inside the mother to help deliver her child. Infection crept in within 2 or 3 days. Fever that climbed until the woman could not recognize her own children standing over her. Swelling, delirium, then death. In the lying in wards of eastern hospitals, childbed fever killed roughly 1 woman in every 6 to 8. On the trail, with no clean water, no sterile cloth, and no medical care of any kind, the odds were grimmer still. And nobody alive understood why it kept happening. Ignaz Semmelweis had instituted hand-washing in Vienna in 1847, though his findings were not formally published until 1861. Not a single soul on the Oregon Trail had heard his name. Number 4. The Sager Orphans. Henry Sager died of camp fever in late August of 1844, somewhere west of the Green River. His wife Naomi, already weakened by giving birth to Henrietta on the trail weeks earlier, failed steadily as the wagon pushed on. She died near what is now Boise, Idaho. 7 children left without a parent anywhere in the world. The oldest, John, was 13 years old. The youngest, Henrietta, was a newborn who had never known anything but the inside of a moving wagon. The company captain, William Shaw, kept the children together and brought them to the Whitman Mission at Wailatpu. In October of 1844, for 3 years, the Sager orphans lived under the care of Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. Then, on the morning of November 29, 1847, the Whitman massacre killed Marcus, Narcissa, and 11 others. 2 of the Sager boys died in the violence. The survivors carried the weight of that story for the rest of their lives. A single American family destroyed in chapters. The trail took the parents. History came back and took the children. Number 3. Women who gave birth alone. A broken axle on a slope, a lame ox that slowed the wagon to a crawl, falling behind the rest of the train by half a day, then a full day. Trail separations happened more often than anyone planned for. And when labor came during one, a woman could find herself with no help whatsoever. Attended only by a husband who had never seen a birth and did not know what to do, or by children too small to understand what was happening to their mother. There are documented accounts of women delivering their own babies on the open prairie without another adult present. Cutting the cord with whatever blade was close at hand, wrapping the child in cloth, resting as long as they dared, then standing up and walking to rejoin the wagon company before nightfall. No witness, no diary entry, no record at all. Only the child who survived, or the child who did not, and a woman who kept walking because the only other option was to stop. And to stop on the Oregon Trail was to die alone. Number 2. The lying in that never happened. In the settled states east of the Missouri, every physician in America prescribed 2 to 4 weeks of absolute bed rest after delivery. Dr. William Buchan's Domestic Medicine, one of the most widely read health guides of that century, called for rest, warmth, quiet rooms, and nourishing broth. It prescribed a full month before the slow resumption of daily tasks. The trail offered nothing on that list. Nothing. The morning after giving birth, the wagon moved. If the woman could not sit up, she sat up anyway and gripped the sideboards. If she could not walk, she rode on the bare wooden planks. The medical wisdom of her own era and the reality of her daily life existed in 2 separate worlds that never once touched each other. She lived in the one that did not care what any doctor wrote or what any book recommended. Her body screamed at her with every step. She kept walking. She walked because the alternative was to be left behind. And to be left behind on the Oregon Trail was to die. Number 1. The morning after. This is where we stop counting and finally tell the truth. Women walk 10, 15, 20 miles the day after giving birth. They cook the evening meal over a fire built from dried buffalo chips with a newborn bound against their chest and blood still drying on their skirts. They carried water from the creek. They loaded the wagon. They called the children to supper and folded the blankets and slept on the ground and rose before dawn to do it again. The trail did not stop. Not for labor, not for hemorrhage, not for grief, not for anything that happened inside a woman's body. It moved at the pace of an ox, roughly 2 miles per hour, every day the sky allowed. And if you could not keep that pace, the West would bury you the way it buried everything else that fell behind. No marker, no ceremony, no name on the ground, just the earth closing over you and the wagons rolling west without turning back. This is the truth Hollywood could never film, not because it was too graphic, because it was too quiet. A woman walking, a baby against her chest, dust on the hem of her dress. No dialogue, no rescue, just endurance so complete it looks from this distance like nothing happened at all. So the answer should be clear now, except it is not, because the deeper you look into the written record, the stranger the silence becomes. Historian Lillian Schlissel spent years studying women's Overland diaries and found the same pattern in everyone she opened. Women wrote in vivid detail about weather, prairie fires, the price of flour, the state of the grass, the illnesses their children suffered mile by mile. They wrote about their own pregnancies and labors in near total silence. Schlissel's conclusion was plain, and it has not been challenged in 40 years of scholarship since. The silence was not carelessness. It was not modesty. It was survival. To dwell on the danger was to make the danger real. To write it down was to give it a shape that could not be unseen. And on a trail where turning back was as deadly as pressing forward, making it real was a luxury no living woman could afford. So they kept quiet. And the quiet became the record. And the record became the history that Hollywood was only too happy to ignore. 3 forces buried these women and their stories. First, the women themselves, who kept silent not from shame, but from the raw need to survive one more day without breaking. Second, the trail promoters who sold Oregon as a paradise of free land and gentle weather. Lansford Hastings wrote a guidebook that lured thousands of families west and never once mentioned what the journey would cost a woman carrying a child. Third, Hollywood. John Ford, The Covered Wagon in 1923. A full century of westerns that built a mythology around the man with the rifle. They gave the woman in the wagon bed a baby to hold, a worried look to wear, and not a single speaking line that mattered. The most courageous physical act on the Oregon Trail belonged to the women, and American cinema spent a century pretending it did not happen. So here is my answer. The most brutal truth is not number 1. It is number 6. The silence. Amelia Stewart Knight recorded every hardship for 5 months. When she gave birth, she barely wrote a word. These women were so tough their survival erased the record before Hollywood ever touched it. Every delivery room in America is a monument to the women who had none of it. And somewhere in eastern Oregon, on ground no one marked, a woman gave birth and walked the next morning. She did not write it down. No one asked her name.